I just want to give a brief introduction on the NASA Fellowship Program before the fellows take over to do their presentation. My name is Gitanjali Kundu, and I'm from the Department of Biology, and I have been the co-coordinator along with Anna Teodorescu for this program this year. I'll give you a brief background of this program that has been running for the past 7 years at Brookdale. We have the NASA STEM grant program at Brookdale to address the STEM skills gap and to promote competence in critical thinking among the workforce for tomorrow. That was the mission for this program, for which the NASA had provided a significant grant to Rutgers University. We were fortunate at Brookdale Community College to be one of the pioneer partners with Rutgers and started recruiting STEM fellows since 2014. Through this project, we got to see the young minds expand their knowledge and experience beyond their classroom, explore their interest in research, and expose them to the fields they thought that never existed. So they were very thrilled about this program. One of the examples, the success example of this story was fourth cohort NASA fellow John Zukowski, who after finishing his degree at Brookdale was offered a New Jersey Space Grant Consortium internship for the summer of 2018 from the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. He's the first Brookdale student to receive this NJSGC internship. Our work impressed the NJSGC, and Brookdale was awarded a prestigious NASA NJSGC affiliate status, which means that our college can now has become an NJSGC NASA partner organization, and now we can play an enhanced role in various NASA programs. So through this program, Brookdale has received close to a $300,000 grant. This year, we are running the 7th cohort program. We have 8 fellows, and each of them will be receiving $2,500 towards their fellowship, as well as an additional $225 to support some of their research material and research cost. So we will start our presentation with our first fellow, Tony White. Tony has been mentored by Professor Jim Crowder from the Department of Biology. We were just going over her presentation. It's awesome. I mean, both me and Anna, we want to thank Jim for taking this time to volunteer and mentor Tony. Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks for your help with this. I will let you introduce Anna. I'll let you introduce Tony and give some, talk something about her, research and experience, and then I will start with her pre-recorded presentation. So, Jim, you can go ahead, please. Thanks.
Happy to. So, first of all, let me just say, I would like to think that I acted as a nice sounding board for Tony, but in terms of her presentation, it's all Tony. Please don't give me any credit. I was really just there to help, and I was very glad to be able to help. I'm not trying to sway the audience, but it's impressive as hell. I think you'll see that. So, Antoinette, and sorry, so used to calling you Tony, is a bio major. She started here when, gosh, I think you were about 24, and absolutely hit the ground running. She was one of those students. I was Antoinette's A&P professor, and from the first few days of classes, and I'm sure I'm talking about every student here. Okay, so that you're dealing with a good student when, from the very beginning, you have a student that's asking questions, not just like what's going to be on the test or quiz, which is fine and good, but also, okay, yeah, I know we talked about this, but then what are the implications of this? And what are the ramifications of which? She was always going past what we were talking about in class and asking lots of great questions, to keep you on your toes, she's the kind of student where you ask questions and you occasionally think, am I doing enough? Because wow. So hit the ground running. We're really just so proud of her. I'm so proud and blessed to have had her as a student. I am told that you're doing Rutgers in fall 2021, right? And you're continuing with the biology thing. So gonna represent Brookdale. All right, gonna represent us well at Rutgers. I don't want to take up any more of your time because I want you to see this presentation because it's awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for that introduction. I'll right now share the screen and start Tony's presentation. Let me see if I can share it. Tony, please give me a thumbs up sign if you are able to hear it.
A lot of people did the extra credit thing. There's
My name is
one there right now.
I'm a biology student at Brookdale Community College, and I'm also part of the 7th cohort of the NASA STEM Fellowship. And I'm happy to be presenting to you today my research presentation on glyphosate and the microbiome. So the microbiome consists of millions of different kinds of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. And these need to exist in balanced ratios in order to have a beneficial effect on health. When the ratios are out of balance, say your beneficial bacteria decreases, it gives the opportunistic bacteria a chance to overpopulate and cause infection. This state of imbalance is called dysbiosis, and it increases your risk for disease. And the ratios, they depend on a lot of different factors, including diet, antibiotics, and the environment. What is glyphosate? Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup, which was developed by Monsanto in 1974. It is recognized as a safe herbicide because it only works by inhibiting the shikimate pathway in plants. And because humans don't use the shikimate pathway, it's generally recognized as safe or no harm to humans at low doses. So we find glyphosate pretty much everywhere, and it's in everything that we consume. And we're pretty much expected to consume it. So the EPA sets an acceptable daily intake, and they set that at 1.75 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that's 68 kilograms and 119 milligrams of glyphosate per day. And you can find this in grains, soy, and honey. Grains are a big one because they also spray glyphosate on grains as a way to dry them, or a desiccant in the production process. Alcoholic beverages or any other beverages from crops, you can find glyphosate, bottled water, tap water, and pretty much everywhere in the environment. So glyphosate is water soluble. So if it gets into a body of water, it can evaporate and end up in the air and rain and soil, and it's everywhere. It's also been found in infant formula and children's cereals. So the way that this connects to our health is that even though humans don't use the shikimate pathway for amino acid synthesis, bacteria in our guts do. So that means that when bacteria come into contact with the glyphosate, it kills some of them. So it typically tends to kill our beneficial bacteria, and the opportunistic bacteria tend to have some resistance to glyphosate. So that can put us into a state of dysbiosis, and it also reduces our short-chain fatty acid synthesis. So we've been talking so much about dysbiosis, and that's what happens when your bacteria are out of a balanced ratio. You're likely to have digestive disturbances if you're in a state of dysbiosis, but it goes much deeper than that because it has also been linked to digestive, cardiovascular, and nervous pathologies. A good picture of what dysbiosis looks like would be an increase in the Firmicutes phylum and a decrease in the Bacteroidetes phylum. So that would be something that dysbiosis looks like. Another thing that's interesting is that excess levels of the Firmicutes phylum has also been linked to bipolar, depression, and Parkinson's disorder. So mental health, the microbiome, and glyphosate was my main interest in this research process. And I wanted to know, could glyphosate, if it could negatively affect the microbiome, could that negatively affect brain health and mental health? And the answer is yes. So on the left, I found an article which did a study. They exposed mice to glyphosate-based herbicides, and they saw a decrease in different kinds of bacteria. And that was associated with anxiogenic and depressive behaviors in mice. So they started to experience depression and anxiety. There was a clear connection there, and I thought that was very, very interesting. On the right, we have an article where they administered human equivalent or human relevant doses to Sprague-Dawley rats. And they found that when they administered it to pregnant rats and their pups, the pups were the ones that were most affected. And the pups' age correlated to prepubescent ages in humans. So therefore, they found that glyphosate modifies the gut microbiota, mostly in prepubescent humans, which is very concerning because it's such a critical time in development. And we're still not 100% sure that this chemical is even safe. So these articles were very, very interesting. So why is glyphosate so popular? It's because it's such a highly effective herbicide, but it's so effective that it kills crops too. So in 1996, Monsanto developed the Roundup Ready soybean, which is a GMO crop, and basically Roundup wouldn't kill it. So farmers were able to spray glyphosate on their fields freely, which led to an increased use in the chemical and glyphosate-resistant weeds. So in order to get past the resistant weeds, farmers found that if you sprayed even higher doses of glyphosate, it would kill these resistant weeds. They also found that if you mix different herbicides together, it would also kill the weeds. So what this resulted in was glyphosate use skyrocketing. And here we have a visual of that. In 1996 is when the crops were introduced, and an additional 383 pounds of herbicides have been used since then than if they were never introduced. So this gives us a good idea of how much glyphosate is actually ending up in our environment. So if we want to avoid glyphosate, fully avoiding it is actually probably impossible at this point, but you can significantly reduce your consumption, which would have a benefit on your health. A good way to start is by eating only organic food. So glyphosate is not permitted in organic farming. Some trace levels can be found, but that's only because of glyphosate already being in the environment. It's much less than non-organic food. Another way is to filter water. So some water filters, they claim to filter out glyphosate and other chemicals, but more testing would have to be done to see if that's actually happening. And another important thing to note is that non-GMO doesn't mean glyphosate free. So when we hear non-GMO, we think more healthy, but Cheerios and Stacy's pita chips, when tested, they had the highest glyphosate concentration, and that's due to it being sprayed on them as a desiccant. So non-GMO does not mean glyphosate free. The good news is that if you significantly reduce your glyphosate consumption, it exits the body very quickly, and you would start to heal the body within a week. This is another great visual. At 0.1 parts per billion, we start to see damage happening in the livers and kidneys of rats. 0.1 parts per billion is also the permitted level for glyphosate in Europe's tap water. If we jump to 700 parts per billion, we see more damage in rats, and that is the permitted level for glyphosate in the United States tap water. And that at 1125 parts per billion, that's the level found in General Mills Cheerios. So this is a great visual because it shows just how much glyphosate we may be coming into contact with on a daily basis, because the actual amount is still unknown. So where do we go from here with this information? Well, more research needs to be done on both glyphosate and the gut microbiota, but the good news is that research is increasing in both of these areas. And with more research comes increased awareness, and people are able to make informed decisions about what they're consuming. One thing that I would like to see is increased accessibility to consumer testing. If you wanted to test your tap water or your food for glyphosate right now, you would have to collect a sample and send it to a laboratory, and it's a very expensive and non-user-friendly process. So I would like to see an at-home glyphosate test where we could really, where it's user-friendly and we could see just how much glyphosate we're consuming, because like I mentioned before, nobody really knows at this point. And I would just like to say thank you to people that have helped me along with the research process, Professor Crowder, Professor Kundu, and Professor Anna Teodorescu. I appreciate all the help that you guys have given me. And Judy Ungar and Dr. Elliot Friedman, thank you for your help with the research process. Thank you.
Well, that was a great presentation, Tony. Does anyone have any question for Tony? Any question that anyone wants to ask?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Sure.
for glyphosate, if it's used for farming and we kind of want to get rid of it, so do you have any substitute, like better version of it?
No, not that I know of. Part of the reason why it's so difficult to replace is because it's so effective. But as far as other substitutes, I'm not aware of any. But there are other countries who have banned the use of Roundup. So I would be interested in looking into those countries and seeing what they're using for farming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tony, this is Jack Ryan. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there, and folks who are in the bio department will know where this arises from, this question. But there's been such a proliferation of diseases, the gastrointestinal diseases, and certainly that is so related to the biome. Have you seen where glyphosate is a contributor to those? Because that has really, whether it's our awareness of them, our diagnosis of them, but there has been just an incredible amount of diverticulitis, Crohn's disease, all the diseases that are related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I've noticed too. It's hard not to notice it these days, you know, the increase of disease. But as far as gastrointestinal diseases, it wasn't a big focus of my research, so I didn't zone in on that a lot. However, I did come across many articles that related glyphosate to inflammation, which I know is a factor in many of those disorders. So
Absolutely, it is. It's one of the measurements that they use for diagnosis is the amount of inflammation you have in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that would be really interesting to look into as far as is that contributing to the gastrointestinal disorders, and which pretty much affects everything in the whole body.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, and a great presentation. Kudos.
Thank you.
I was just gonna, Jack, the research that's out there, I mean, Tony is right that there's plenty of research in terms of things that influence inflammation through specifically gut flora and things like that. There are virtually no studies that tie that specifically to this. So I think it's a very ripe area for research. And I think that you and others are clearly right in suspecting that, you know, the rise in use of things like this might be part of the rise of things like colic problems and things of that nature. But although it's strongly suspected, we still need some of the research to fill in those gaps.
Yes, thank you. Amy, I see you
Yeah.
have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. This is really awesome. It's just really amazing. So kudos to you. And secondly, since you said your focus was on kind of the mental health aspect, the effects on the mental health, my question, and if glyphosate leaves the system relatively quickly once it's eliminated, I don't know if your research had, you kind of encountered anything about how soon after, you know, you've eliminated kind of excess levels, the system would get back into balance, and what, if anything, a person could do to sort of expedite that process to kind of get to them, you know, if you suspect, like with a child perhaps, who in fact eats a lot of Cheerios. So this is very helpful.
Sorry to scare you.
Yeah, no, not scary. I mean, like I kind of know a little bit about these things, but just, you know, to potentially be looking for sort of changes after diet changes have been kind of put into place.
So I did find an article that said, that gave me the information that once you reduce your glyphosate consumption, you start getting rid of it within a week. So I think that is a pretty short time span, but I don't know of any markers to look for that say like, oh, now the body's definitely getting rid of it. I'm not sure that there's a lot of biological testing. If you wanted to go that route of, you know, testing, I'm not sure that there's a lot of that. But yeah, so it's an area with really not so much research in it just yet.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, no, but this is amazing that you're exploring this. I'm a librarian too. I was happy. Thanks for shouting out to my colleague, Judy Unger. And this is how scholarship happens, right? Like, you've done this presentation, you've inspired me now to look further into this and try to explore and do some of my own research. So I just thank you very much and good luck to you.
thank you. If you're interested, I can email you one of the articles about it coming out of the body.
That would be great. I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think because of interest of time, we would have this conversation, you know, for the entire time, but I will have time for one more question and then we'll move to the next presenter, if that's okay. And then for others, you know, you can please feel free to reach out to Tony for other questions. So whoever wants to, Megan, do you want to ask the question?
I have one question in the chat that I didn't answer before, but it says, is there any current legislation aimed at restricting Roundup use? Not so much in the United States. Like I said, there is an acceptable daily intake level, so it has to be under a certain amount, but not so much in the United States. It's a lot higher than it is in other countries. But there are, in other countries, they have banned the use of Roundup or significantly reduced it. Do we still have time for Megan?
Megan, do you still want to ask your question? Can you wait later if possible?
Oh,
so that,
I can wait if we don't have time.
Yeah, so that we can accommodate other presenters. We have 7 more presenters. So we want to wrap this, but I know it's so interesting. I want to continue with that conversation too. But thank you so much for all those questions. And thanks, Tony. Thanks to Jim again. We'll move on to our next presenter, Bobby Caze. And Bobby is going to be introduced by Anna. Anna, do you want to?
So before I introduce Bobby, you can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Before I introduce Bobby, I would like to encourage some of our attendees to join Taylor Sinelli's presentation. So next, we were supposed to start at 11:35, the next round of presentations. Such an interesting presentation, Tony. Outstanding. Thank you. But so Bobby Caze is next for the NASA Fellows, but Taylor Sinelli has also done a really tremendously amazing job. Please, if some of you could join her presentation as well. The link is in the Achievement Showcase website. And then after Taylor's presentation and Bobby's, you will again have a choice to attend Gary's in this link or Samantha Scott's at this link here, right? So right now, I would like to give everyone a minute to have a chance to switch to the other presentation if you would like to. All right, so Bobby Caze is a computer science student. He will graduate in summer of 2021 with an associate's degree in computer science. Bobby is the president of the Black Student Union and the treasurer of the Student Life Board. So his time is much appreciated at Brookdale. Bobby is also involved with the Crew Club, and he was a youth STEM director for 3 years at the Southern Aviation and Career Camp 2017 to 2019, where he taught camp members coding and drone flying. So for his fellowship project, Bobby has worked with Mr. Ali Naqvi, who works on the cybersecurity team at Con Edison in New York City. And he set out to learn how cybersecurity works and how companies provide cybersecurity. And to this end, Bobby has attempted to hack into, I believe, his own computer or his sister's computer. He will tell us. Bobby will tell us what he did. Take it away, Bobby.
All right, excellent introduction, Professor Anna. Hi, everyone. My name is Bobby Caze, and I'm a computer science major, and I've really been interested in cybersecurity since high school. And this was really like my first time doing a project in cybersecurity. So I was really excited, and I wanted to say thanks to my mentor, Mr. Ali Naqvi, and I want to thank my mentors, Anna and Professor Kundu, before I start. And I'm going to give you guys some background. This is a Nessus vulnerability scanner. At my mentor's job, they kind of do vulnerability scans like that. This is kind of the basic version, Nessus, because they do a lot of other high-tech stuff that's more advanced. But he started me off with this, and I really thought it was really cool. So I'm happy to share this with you guys. So this is Nessus. It's a vulnerability scanner. And there we go. So the goals of this vulnerability scan was to run a basic network scan and to test my desktop's vulnerabilities. And I did it on a Windows 10 laptop. And the softwares that I used was Nessus, VM VirtualBox, Kali Linux, and Ubuntu. And as you guys can see in this picture, this would be the result of the network scan. It'll tell you the different types of scans. So red means critical, 10, the orange means high, the yellow means medium, the green means low, and then blue's information. So you're going to see a lot of blue because most computers have a lot of information. So that's normal. But during this, you guys are going to see how safe my laptop is. And then now I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to give you some background on vulnerabilities. Let me move this here. All right, awesome. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses or gaps in a system that can be exploited by threats to gain unauthorized access to an asset. Vulnerabilities can also be identified by scanning, assessments, penetration testing, and known weaknesses / limitations in technology. And basically, like, these pictures demonstrate vulnerabilities, you know, broken chain. And next slide. So VirtualBox was a software that I used to help run my basic network scan. And VirtualBox is a free open source hosted hypervisor for x86 virtualization. VirtualBox is designed to run virtual machines on a physical machine without reinstalling an operation system that is running on a physical machine. So this was very efficient, and it was very it barely took any time to download this. So that helped out a lot. And this is Kali Linux. This is also another software. This software is actually on the VirtualBox, and it's a penetration testing platform. It contains a vast array of tools and utilities. Kali Linux enables security and IT professionals to access the security of their systems. So at big corporations, big IT corporations, a lot of them like to use Kali Linux to see how secure a lot of their devices are. And I used Ubuntu. It was a great device. It was really fun to use. Ubuntu is a Linux distribution based on Debian and composed mostly of free and open source software. Ubuntu is the modern open source operating system on Linux for the enterprise server, desktop, cloud, and IoT. Here's the logo. And then last but not least, we got Nessus. So this is where I'm doing the vulnerability scan on. Nessus is a very powerful scanning tool. Nessus, you can make a free account, or you can have a paid membership account if you want to upgrade. And Nessus has 4 different components to make vulnerability scans work. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you. So you may be asking, how does a Nessus basic scan work? So a basic Nessus scan has 4 components: port scanning, service detection, vulnerability identification, probing / site scanning. And I'll go in more to detail in here. So the first component is port scanning. Port scanning is a method of determining which ports on a network are open and could be receiving or sending data. And port scanning also is where the scanner is going to determine which hosts are live and which ports are open on those hosts. You guys can see examples of port scanning. It tells you if it's opening, and asks like, what can it do for you? And then like if it's not listening or anything, or just closed, it's going to show like a red mark. And then filter drop or blocked means it's silencing the messages. And here's another diagram. And then the next component is service detection. This is where Nessus sends out probes to find out which application is running on that port, version number, and the actual name of it. And we got vulnerability identification. And this is where Nessus compares what it discovered about each service detected on each host, which you'll see in the display soon. And vulnerability identification compares it against its database of known vulnerabilities of those applications and version numbers. So, example of vulnerabilities, a critical vulnerability would be example of, you having a weak password, like, I don't know, password that would make it very easy for hackers, to guess and hack into your account. And if you have a poorly administrated system, you're very susceptible and vulnerable to
Carl loves puzzles.
attacks.
And what interests her most are puzzles. Scientists can.
And then the next component that you got is site scanning / probe attack on web applications. And site scanning is where Nessus will further identify if there are false positives or identify if vulnerability actually exists. And this phase is where cyber attackers gather information about the structure of the web application. So that's like web pages and parameters, and the supporting infrastructure, like the actual operating systems and databases. And now I'm going to show you guys the video. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to run this vulnerability scan. But first things first, you got to log into your Nessus account, put your username, put your password in, then hit that blue sign in button, and look, we're in. All right, the software that I used to get this vulnerability scan up and running, I used Oracle VM VirtualBox Manager as Kali Linux Ubuntu. It's a really great tool to run vulnerability scans efficiently. All right, let's go back to the Nessus. And as you guys can see, we got to look for that basic network scan. Okay, we found it. So let's put that name in. and let's name it target name, because why not? That sounds like a cool name. Then after that, we're gonna need an IP address as a target to get that vulnerability scan running. So put that in. Once you do that, there's the IP address. Hit that save button so we can launch this vulnerability scan. All right, so save successfully. Now you gotta find the target name so we can get this up and running. So find it, you're gonna hit that play button that says launch, and once that's going, it's gonna come up to the screen above. There you go. It says on demand, it's running. All right, as you guys can see, is now you're starting to see the different vulnerabilities popping up for our vulnerability scan. This is really good. And in a few seconds, I'm about to run and talk about the pie chart that you're seeing right now. And here I go. All right, here's what the colors on the pie chart means. Red means critical, orange means high, yellow means medium, green means low, and blue is your information. All right, so our scan is still running. I'm gonna take you to a vulnerability. It's called NFS, Exported Share Information Disclosure. As you guys can see, it's a critical vulnerability. And if you scroll down, it gives you the description, it gives you the solution that can help, it gives you the output. And if you scroll down, there's the port information and the host that it came from. Then if you scroll down to the right of the page, you'll see the reference information. And if you click the CVE, it'll tell you a bunch of great information and descriptions. And it also gives you solutions and tools to help. And it also tells you about the weakness enumeration. And it tells you about the known affected software configurations. It tells you about your change history. And all of this is provided to keep your desktop and software safe. All right. And a few recommendations I had was that if you want to complete a more efficient scan, I definitely recommend you use the Oracle VirtualBox with Kali Linux and Ubuntu to run vulnerability scans. And I also recommend you use Nessus, of course, where you run the scan. And here are my references. And that's the end.
Thank you so much, Bobby. That was a wonderful presentation. Any question for Bobby?
Bobby, I'm Jack Ryan. How you doing? I teach English here at the college. What you've given us is a wonderful presentation. Kind of reminds me of the computer science version of Monsters, Inc. Because so many of us, know that there are monsters hiding under the bed and in the closet, but so many of us don't really even know where the closet is or how to look under the bed. So I really appreciate that. Could you tell us a little, how is this different than from the typical virus scans of Malwarebytes or McAfee or Norton, those kinds of things? What's the difference in doing this?
The difference from this is basically you're kind of learning yourself, more hands-on, where, McAfee and all of them, they kind of do it themselves. But when you do it from Nessus, you're kind of learning hands-on, and it's pretty much like a learning experience per se. So I'd say that's pretty much the difference for me. So when you use Nessus, you're kind of like doing everything manually, and that's the fun part.
Yeah, good. All right, thanks. And I appreciate that because I'm sure you'll learn a lot more. As I was saying, so many of us know that we're vulnerable, but we really are unsure of how to deal with that. And I guess if we know, the different ports that are more vulnerable than others, we can protect ourselves. So thanks for this. It's really fascinating.
Thank you.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation, Bobby. And we will move to our next presenter, Gary Roberts. Gary Roberts has been mentored by Professor Lisa Haley Lisa Haley has been part of our NASA fellowship program since the beginning, 2014. She has mentored not only Gary this year, but many previous NASA fellows in the previous year. She has helped select the fellows, and she has played a very pivotal role in this NASA fellowship program. So she couldn't be here during this presentation today because of some other commitment, important commitment. So I'm going to introduce Gary Roberts on her behalf. Gary is a consistent member of the Dean's List at Brookdale Community College. Gary is turning being a student into a mission for success. Gary has spent the last 6 years working in the heavy construction industry before deciding to return to school in pursuit of a degree in civil engineering. He's an officer in Brookdale Physics Club and is an active member of the Engineering and Math Club. Gary will graduate Brookdale in summer of 2021 with an associate degree in civil engineering and will be pursuing a bachelor's degree in civil engineering at NJIT starting this upcoming fall. So I will play the pre-recorded presentation of Gary, and then towards the end, Gary is here to take any questions. So let me share the screen.
Hello, my name is Gary Roberts, and I'm an engineering student at Brookdale Community College. For my project, I decided to pursue a more environmentally friendly alternative to traditional pressure treatment chemicals used currently in the railroad, telecom, heavy, and marine construction industries. What many people don't know is that some pretty harsh chemicals are used to prevent this wood from rotting, and pesticides are also pumped into this wood to prevent insect onslaught. Creosote was the most widely used compound for marine, railroad, and telecom utility poles. In 1984, a 6-year investigation by the EPA concluded and showed that creosote can cause cancer and genetic changes in lab animals, as well as causing skin cancer in workers handling it on a daily basis. A ban on creosote in the new marine and foundation construction industry was finally signed in 2007 in New Jersey and New York. This is 23 years after that study was concluded. Creosote is completely outlawed in the European Union, by the way. This also does not include the railroad and telecom applications where this substance is still used to this day. It is sad to see a substance that is proven to cause cancer in the workers that have to handle it on a daily basis still being used every day. Taking the place of creosote pilings for marine and foundation piling is CCA, or chromated copper arsenate, which is the dark green treatment you'll see on new boardwalks and piers, one of the main ingredients being arsenic. Knowing the toxicity of arsenic, you can see how this is still a major concern. Workers handling this material are still in harm's way. These pilings must be cut and sized to fit their final homes, meaning the chemical can become airborne from dust and particles during the cutting and resizing process. Not only that, but an additional concern with CCA is the possibility of these chemicals leaching into groundwater over time. All that being said, I thought a good idea for my experiment or my project would be to try and begin the search for a more environmentally and human-friendly alternative to these compounds. I wanted to use a natural compound that was very safe and hopefully very effective. The main reason why many of these harsher chemicals are used in these applications today is because they do a great job. They keep wood intact in adverse environments for long periods of time. An article by Paul Fissett of UMass.edu states that untreated lumber can last outside for between 2 to 5 years, while treated lumber can easily last 2 to 10 times longer than that. When it comes to commercial application, which is my main focus for this project, this is important because public safety is a concern, and having to replace entire boardwalks, bulkheads, lengths of railroad every couple of years is just not economical and would cost the public tons of money. So finding a natural alternative to this would be great. Now, the compounds that I've selected to use as preservatives are beeswax and pine rosin. Beeswax is a compound that I had in mind from the beginning. I'm most excited about it, and it is already used in woodworking as a finish, but has not been attempted in an application like this. If beeswax can be proven to work as a wood preservative for commercial applications, I think that it could also cause a major ripple effect in the way that people see and value bees. The bee population in the world is steadily declining, and it would be a great incentive for humans to try to beef up the population. Just a fun fact, 1 out of every 3 bites of food taken worldwide are dependent in some way on bee pollination. But that's a topic for another project. The other compound that I had in mind is pine rosin. Pine rosin is one of those things that is used everywhere and you don't even realize it. It's used in photocopy paper, glue, printer ink, soap, and soda. It's also used historically as a waterproofing agent, and this is where my interest was piqued. I wanted to match industry practices, but I realized that borrowing a pressure treatment facility to perform an experiment was not going to happen. So I began to design my own scaled pressure treatment facility. The process is important because it pushes chemicals into the cellular structure of the wood. In this slide, you can see my original hand-drawn design. When lumber is treated in a facility, it is a 5-step process, which was important for me to mimic, and the process is as follows. 1, you have to seal the chamber and vacuum the lumber. 2, you need to flood the chamber with chemical while it's still under vacuum. This is very important. 3, you have to pressurize the chamber that's filled with liquid. After that, 4, you have to drain the chamber, and then lastly, you will reseal the chamber and pull an additional vacuum to suck back in any residual chemical into the wood. My chosen material for this scaled treatment facility was steel pipe and brass valves. I needed to use the steel and brass because typical, less expensive PVC plastic pipe could not withstand the pressures required to properly treat the lumber. So basically, if you subject PVC plastic pipe to these forces, there's a good chance that the pipe could explode from the pressure. So I obviously wanted to avoid that, especially since I was building this in my garage. I modified a vacuum pump to be able to receive the correct tubing for the steel pipe, and used an air compressor that I already had to create my required vacuum and pressure. The most challenging part of this process was finding a solution for flooding my chamber with liquid while still under a vacuum. Once you pull a vacuum on a chamber, any introduction of atmospheric pressure will ruin your vacuum. So my solution to this issue was to build a second chamber that held liquid chemicals in a column above the chamber. The liquid chemicals would act as a seal between the vacuum chamber and the atmospheric pressure above. So basically, when I opened the ball valve to flood the chamber, the liquid would act as a seal layer between the vacuum chamber and the atmospheric pressure above it. I made sure there was enough liquid in the chamber so that it was past the ball valve. Thus, when I closed the ball valve again to pressurize my liquid-filled chamber, everything was as it should be, and this worked beautifully. So once this was sorted out, the rest of the process was pretty straightforward, and the experiment was underway. Okay, so I used 5 specimens for my experiment. All were soft pine. I used 1 piece of normal untreated pine as a control. I used 1 piece of pine treated with food coloring so I can make sure my treatment was working. I used 1 piece of traditionally treated pine and 1 piece of pine treated with beeswax and 1 piece of pine treated with the pine rosin. I've covered the build of my chamber pretty extensively, but what happens after the lumber is treated? Well, let me tell you. Once the wood is treated, it is placed in a simulated seashore environment. My supervisor, you can see her pictured here, and I drove to the beach and filled buckets with sand and water. And this is where my pieces of lumber will live out the rest of their days. So, as far as results go, my experiment is still ongoing. As stated earlier, it takes years for wood to fully degrade. Obviously, I don't have much time, but I will keep this experiment going for as long as possible. And at the last minute, I will pull my specimen and compare the results. I'm hopeful that after a few months that this experiment will have been long enough that my natural compounds will yield enough positive results versus the control specimen to show promise for my natural compounds and warrant further investigation. Some things I would do differently if I were to perform this experiment again are I would do the experiment over a much longer period of time. The longer period of time would allow for much more drastic and clear results. I would also try to increase the amount of time that my specimens spend under vacuum and pressure in hopes that it would allow for a deeper penetration of wood. And lastly, I would acquire more substances and compounds to test. I'm really excited that I was able to bring this issue to light. I think that it's important, and moving forward, hopefully more regulations can be put in place outlawing these carcinogenic and toxic substances in order to protect the frontline workers who are in direct contact. I want to thank my advisor, Professor Haley, who helped me design my treatment facility and guiding me through this process. And I would also like to thank Professors Kundu and Teodorescu, as well as my fellow NASA fellows for your help and support. I'm truly proud to be a part of Brookdale's NASA STEM Fellowship. Thank you. Have a good day.
That was such an interesting presentation. Thank you so much, Gary. Unfortunately, we are really pressed for time. We may have time for only one question. Would anyone want to ask a question to Gary?
Yeah, like real quick. So he mentioned that use of creosote and CCA was banned in Europe. So do you know what they use?
What use is it banned?
No, I mean you mentioned that use of creosote and CCA was banned in Europe. So do you know what they actually do instead?
There are some other chemicals similar to CCA that are being used. Mainly the biggest one is MCA, which is micronized copper azole, and it's more of a copper compound that acts as an insecticide and also stops the wood. The copper in that actually is what turns the wood green. So if you ever see like a green piece of treated lumber, actually the copper that's turning it green.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
That was an interesting question. Thank you so much again, Gary, and thanks to Lisa Haley, Gary's mentor, once again. We will move on to our next presenter, Megan O'Hare. Megan has been mentored by Professor Daneshgar Bedram Daneshkar from Monmouth University. Professor Daneshkar had been helping us mentoring fellows since the very beginning of the program. Second cohort, Chloe Baker. Third cohort, fellow Samira Wahab. They had been mentored by Professor Daneshkar. So Megan, I have made you the co-host. I'll introduce Megan. Megan is a math and science major at Brookdale. She is a member of PTK and is involved in Brookdale Honors Organization. After attending Brookdale, she's interested in pursuing a career in healthcare. So Megan, I have made you a co-host if you want to share your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. So my project investigated the water quality of Monmouth County. So this project seeks to investigate whether toxic metals are present in the drinking water source that supplies Monmouth County. So that is Swimming River Reservoir, which is located in Lincroft. So we know that the consumption of high amounts of toxic metals such as lead, inorganic arsenic, and others have been correlated with severe impacts on human health. So as Gary mentioned, inorganic arsenic is a known carcinogen, whereas lead can cause learning delays and impair the brain. So according to the National Cancer Institute, over 1 million new cases of cancer were diagnosed in 2020 in the United States. Since this disease is so prevalent, it is important we thoroughly investigate any and all causes of cancer to better protect ourselves from this disease. So this graphic is meant to illustrate how these heavy metals such as arsenic and lead are entering our water sources. So this often occurs due to runoff from industrial and urban settings, which rainwater can then carry downhill into our drinking water source. According to National Geographic, toxins increase in concentration as they are passed up the food chain in a process known as biomagnification. If a pollutant is absorbed by phytoplankton, for instance, which is close to the bottom of the food chain, although each phytoplankton may absorb only a small amount of this chemical or toxin, a fish who eats many phytoplankton will take in the toxin from all of this phytoplankton that they consume. So as you advance higher up the food chain, a toxin becomes more concentrated with each subsequent trophic level. And the higher the concentration of this toxin or chemical, the more severely it can have an impact on the given organism. So for us as humans, we're close to the top of the food chain, if not the top of the food chain. So this is very concerning for us, this principle of biomagnification. So why is this research important? You may be asking yourself, doesn't our government already test our drinking water source for toxins? And the answer is yes. However, recent events in Flint, Michigan may indicate that the government might have some financial incentives in some cases to overlook the presence of harmful substances in drinking water sources. So for those who are not aware, recently the Flint City Council switched residents' water source in an attempt to cut costs. The result was discolored and pungent water that was later proven to contain lead. The switch occurred in the spring of 2014, but it wasn't until the fall of 2015 residents were told by their government officials to stop drinking the water. So for that year and a half, residents' concerns were disregarded and minimized by government officials who insisted that the water was safe to consume. So it wasn't until researchers from Virginia Tech eventually took samples from Flint, Michigan, which you can see here on the left side. This is a Virginia Tech professor holding a water sample from Detroit, which is, you can see is clear compared with Flint, which is very discolored. And the researchers from Virginia Tech found that the water source contained a concerning amount of lead. It was only then that this issue was addressed by the government officials and that people were told to stop drinking the water in Flint. So on the right side, you can see Flint tap water filling a bathtub coming directly from the tap. So often water sources may contain tiny amounts of metals such as lead, like trace amounts. It is only when the concentration exceeds a certain threshold that the Environmental Protection Agency considers the levels a cause for concern. So for lead, that threshold in the top center, you can see is 5 parts per billion. And in the bottom right, it shows that the highest level of lead Virginia Tech researchers found in Flint was 13,000 parts per billion. So not only is it way over that 5 parts per billion threshold, it's actually 3 times the amount of lead necessary to qualify the water source as toxic waste, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. Keep in mind, this is from the highest level that they recorded, so not every single residence was experiencing water that was quite this toxic, but this was the highest that the researchers found. So it's very concerning that they were never told, you know, for a year and a half not to drink this water. So coming back to my project, given the events in Flint, Michigan, it is crucial for individuals with no outside incentives to perform our own periodic tests on the drinking water in Monmouth County. So that's what I'm trying to do here with my project. So I visited 11 different locations and I was able to save those locations on my phone so I can return and throughout different times throughout the semester, which I'll get into, but all of the sample locations stem from the water source, which is Swimming River Reservoir in Lincroft. And I took samples from Lincroft, Red Bank, Fairhaven, and Seabright, amongst others. So I visited 11 different locations and took 2 samples from each location. And this is just so you can see a better look at the places that I visited and took samples from. So from each location, I took about 10 centimeters of sediment, which is on the left side, and 1 test tube filled with water. And then on the right side here, you can see this photo was actually taken near Brookdale. And you can see there are some plastic bottles and glass bottles within the water source, which is concerning. So the first group of samples, which was 22 samples, 2 from each of those 11 locations, was taken on a winter day. And then the second sample that I'm going to take is going to be after a rainstorm. So I'm actually probably going to take it, I think, this weekend, depending on the weather. But the purpose of taking it after the rainstorm is to see how runoff might influence the findings. And the final sample will be taken on a spring day. And then once I've collected all the samples, I'm planning to send them to a certified water testing lab where we can screen them for a variety of toxic metals. And yeah, after I do so, I will compare the toxins in the water samples, if any. Hopefully we won't find any, but compare, you know, to the standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency to determine if there are significant amounts of these, you know, concerning substances, and proceed accordingly. So yeah, that's my project. These are my references. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank my mentor, Dr. Pedram Dineshkar from Monmouth University, for his guidance and dedication to helping me with this project. He's been a huge help. And he's taught me a lot, and I really appreciate his guidance. I'd also like to thank Dr. Kundu and Professor Teodorescu for their advice and support throughout this semester. I couldn't have completed my project without their help. All right.
Thank you so much, Megan. That was a wonderful presentation. We may have time for one question for Megan. Is anyone looking to ask a question?
I have a question. So when
when the residents in Flint, Michigan were drinking the water, was it always as brown as it looked in those pictures, or would that be probably the most contaminated water?
I'm not sure about how that varied from residence to residence, but from like I found some articles about the chemical composition and stuff, and I guess what happened, like, sorry, I'll try to keep it brief, but basically what happened was that the water source that they switched to, which was a river, contained some concerning like bacteria and stuff such as E. coli. And so they wanted to clean the water using chlorine to make the water safer to drink because it contained these harmful substances. And the result was, because they added the chlorine to that, it caused all of the pipes and stuff to start dissolve this protective layer between the pipe and the lead, which was underneath it, because normally there's this protective layer within the pipe, so that way the water passing through isn't exposed to that lead. But I guess the discoloration was caused by the fact that like the pipes were leaching by that chlorine, was causing it to dissolve. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it
Yeah.
probably was clear in the beginning and they had no idea.
Right. So it was really caused by that dissolvement of the pipes that was causing the metal inside the pipe to leach off, and then that was causing the water to appear discolored. So yeah, I think it varied depending like from residence to residence, but the water was discolored pretty early on, and it wasn't taken seriously for a very long time until it received, like the national attention that it did receive. But yeah, it's concerning for sure.
Thank you.
Indeed concerning. Well, that was a great presentation, Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. We will now move to our next presenter, Ashley Gutierrez. Ashley couldn't be here because of some other commitment, but we have her pre-recorded presentation. Ashley has been mentored by Professor Eric Gall from Chemistry Department. Professor Gall has been involved with the NASA Fellowship Program since the beginning. He has helped in selection of the fellow by, being in the committee, helped in the peer tutoring program by recommending many fellow, students for peer tutoring, which we are hoping to start again from next year. And he has also mentored, previous fellows, and this year he has mentored Ashley. So we want to thank Professor Gall for all his help. So Professor Gall will now go ahead and introduce Ashley. Thank you, Eric, for all your help.
Thank you. It's interesting because I actually never met Ashley in person, but I have something here to read. Ashley will be graduating in the fall 2021 semester with an associate's degree in mathematics and biology. She is the vice president of the West Club and has been involved in many of their club activities. She has also helped to run the STEM Quiz Bowl earlier this month. Ashley is also a member of the National Society of Leadership and Success. Ashley says that she enjoys doing math problems when she is stressed out, loves chemistry because it fulfills her curiosity, and likes to read in her free time. After extended conversations with Doran Declan, a nuclear engineer for Exelon, she has discovered a passion and curiosity for nuclear energy and would one day like to work in a nuclear power plant. Ashley moved to New Jersey from Peru 2 years ago to pursue a chemical engineering degree. She will transfer to Rutgers University in spring 2022. It's my pleasure to introduce Ashley's recorded presentation.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that introduction. Ashley, again, is not here, so she wouldn't be able to take the questions after the presentation. So let me share Ashley's presentation. I would request that please mute yourself if you have background sound. We really appreciate that. Thank you. So let me start.
Hi, my name is Ashley Castillo. I'm a student from Brookdale Community College from the Math Science program. Today, I will be talking about nuclear waste and overcoming the challenge of nuclear waste. I chose this topic because I wanted to learn more about nuclear reactors in USA and also how some engineers have developed some solutions for nuclear waste. Thanks. To understand more about nuclear energy, we will learn some basic concepts about it. We'll start by radioactivity. So what is radioactivity? Radioactivity is caused by an unstable nuclei. So what causes an unstable nuclei? It causes radiation. Radiation is caused in form of alpha, beta, and gamma particles. Nowadays, we can see some examples of radiation as the sunlight or X-rays. So some areas such as the medical industry and the engineering industry have taken advantage of radiation. For example, in the medical industry, they have taken advantage to treat cancer, and in the engineering industry, they have taken advantage to produce clean energy. Thanks. So there is two main types of nuclear reactors. There is a light water reactor and a pressurized water reactor. We will explain it about light water reactors because USA operates with light water reactors. Also, there is two main types of light water reactors that USA operates, a pressurized light water reactor and a boiling light water reactor. So USA operates with water, regular water. Why? Because regular water helps as a neutron moderator in here, which will cause more fission, and as a coolant, which is in charge in the transfer of heat. And also because it's cheaper. So both reactors have a nuclear vessel, as you see here, and they are composed by control rods and the fuel. In the next slide, I will be explaining more about the fuel. So what are control rods? Control rods help the reactor to absorb the excess of neutrons. So these control rods are made of cadmium, boron, or hafnium. Thanks. One important element for a nuclear reactor is the fuel. So the fuel is composed from uranium-235. Where do we get uranium-235? From natural uranium. Natural uranium has two isotopes, uranium-238 and uranium-235. They both are found in rock and seawater. So how do we process natural uranium to extract uranium-235? There is two options, gaseous diffusion and gas centrifuge. We're going to talk about gas centrifuge because it's more often used. Gas centrifuge use uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas. This device will be used to get enriched uranium, so uranium-235. So it will separate the isotopes from the natural uranium. The centrifuge will rely on the centripetal force, so particles from different masses will be separated. The fuel is in the form of nuclear pellets, so it will be found in the nuclear fuel rod. In the next slide, I will be talking about more elements of a nuclear reactor and how a nuclear reactor operates. Thank you. How a light water nuclear reactor operates. We have here a pressurized water reactor and a boiling water reactor. A pressurized water reactor is composed by the primary loop and the secondary loop. So the primary loop in a pressurized water reactor is composed by the reactor vessel, the control rods, and a pressurizer. So how all this system works? This is because it occurs nuclear fission in a reactor vessel. What is nuclear fission? Nuclear fission in a nuclear reactor is when a neutron hits uranium-235 to produce more energy and radioactive elements. So when the water is heated in the reactor vessel, the water will be transferred to the next system, but the water is heated until not boiled, so it's thanks to the pressurizer. The pressurizers will pressurize the water and it will keep the same temperature. So the next system is the secondary loop. The secondary loop is composed by the steam generator, the turbine, and the condenser. The steam generator is connected with the primary loop. So here, as you see, the water will be heated and will be producing steam. The steam will travel to the turbine will move, and it will produce energy into the generator. Then, if there is some water left over in the turbine, so the water will travel to the condenser, and the condenser will put back the water into the steam generator. Same as here, but a little bit different. So the boiling water reactor is only composed by the reactor vessel. So in the reactor vessel will occur nuclear fission, which will heat the water. The water will be heated and the steam will travel to the turbine. The turbine will move, will be moving, and then the energy will be transferred to the generator, which will produce energy. Then, if there is some water left over, the same as a pressurized water reactor, so the water will be moving back to the condenser and will be moving back to the reactor vessel. Thank you. So, nuclear fuel only spends 8 years in a nuclear reactor. After all those years, the spent nuclear fuel is taken out and put it in a nuclear pool. This is to cool it down. Then it's a storage underground. Well, this is a problem to our environment and to people's safety. So in order to understand more about spent nuclear fuel, I did some research about recycling fuel, which I will be talking about in the next slide. Thank you. Recycling nuclear waste. Here, as you see in the graph, I'm going to talk about spent nuclear fuel first. So 95% of the spent nuclear fuel is composed by uranium. So that means that we still can get energy from the spent fuel. So how are we going to take uranium from that spent fuel? How are we going to do that? So we're going to do that by the pyroprocessing. The pyroprocessing is when the spent fuel is raised to high temperatures and then put it into the electrochemical process in order to have uranium to reuse it into a fast nuclear reactor. So I'm going to explain about more pyroprocessing in simple words. First, we're going to start by chopping the spent fuel into small pieces. This is going to be done by the head-end process. Here, the small pieces will be oxidized and crushed into 3 uranium octoxide at 500 Celsius. Then the electrochemical process will be in charge to separate the usable uranium and the usable products from the non-usable products. This is going to be done by the current energy and a molten salt solution. The usable elements that will be taken from the electrochemical process will be shaped again into pellets, into new nuclear fuel, and it will be placed in a fast nuclear reactor. A fast nuclear reactor differs from a light reactor because a fast nuclear reactor will take more energy from the nuclear fuel than the light one, than the light water reactor. There is a really good point about this because the spent fuel taken from the nuclear fast reactor will decrease the amount of years from their half-life. So if the light water reactor has a half, the spent fuel has a half-life of 24,000 years underground, this will have 500 years underground, which is a great amount of years decrease. I think this is very important because if we do more research about nuclear waste and how to deal with this problem, we can also deal with climate change. So we will have clean energy in our country in order to give our future generations a better life. Further research will be conducted in this. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Thanks.
That was a great presentation, Ashley. Thank you so much. And Eric, thank you again for mentoring Ashley. We move to our next presenter, Nora. Nora is going to do her live presentation today. It's a very interesting presentation on Alzheimer's. And I would want to thank Dr. Robert Hughes, who actually lives in California. And he has mentored Nora throughout in her project. And Nora has such wonderful things to say about Dr. Hughes. Dr. Hughes, we want to thank you on behalf of Brookdale and NASA Fellowship Program for your help that you have extended to mentor Nora. Do you want to go ahead and introduce Nora, please? Thank
Sure.
you.
I'm calling in from Berkeley, California. I'm a drug discovery guy in biotech, but I have a long history of as a professor in biochemistry. And so I've mainly mentored postdoctoral fellows. So it was interesting working with an undergrad, which I do not have much experience in. So it's kind of fun. So let's see. So she and others reached out to me because they wanted, she wanted to learn about Alzheimer's, and neurodegeneration has been a long interest of mine. So she sent me a script, which I'll go over briefly. Let's see. She loves puzzles, and that's why she's interested in science, especially Alzheimer's disease. She'll be graduating in the spring at 2021 with full honors and an AS degree in biology. She likes biology and chemistry. I'm sort of getting through this quickly. She wants to pursue a career in healthcare. She's a member of the biology club, Honors Association, Phi Theta Kappa, was one of the judges in the Timberlane Virtual Science Fair. She's a caregiver, likes to work with senior citizens and shelter animals. So take it away, Nora.
All right, thank you, Bob. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? And am I on mute? Am I good?
Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Hello, my name is Nora and I love puzzles, whether it's jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles, or riddles. I like being able to look at a problem from different perspectives and find an innovative way to fix it. But there is one puzzle that I would especially like to solve, and that is Alzheimer's disease. This is why I decided to take a look at Alzheimer's disease from the point of view of the cardiovascular system from the NASA Fellowship Project, and see if that perspective could help further the study of Alzheimer's disease. Today, I'll share with you the results of the research I conducted under the mentorship of Dr. Robert Hughes in my project titled Blood Will Tell, the Role of the Cardiovascular System in Alzheimer's Disease. To begin, Alzheimer's disease is a fatal neurodegenerative brain disorder that impairs cognitive function in older adults. The accumulation of plaques and tangles in the brain are hallmark characteristics of the disease. The diagram on the right displays a healthy brain next to a brain with advanced Alzheimer's. As you can see, Alzheimer's disease leads to the death of neurons, primarily in the areas of the brain known as the cortex and the hippocampus. The pathology of the disease is not fully understood, and there are currently no approved disease-modifying therapies for Alzheimer's. Current research being done on Alzheimer's disease has looked to the cardiovascular system, its role in the diagnosis, pathological progression, and the treatment of Alzheimer's. Now, you may be wondering what the brain's relationship is to the heart. It turns out the two are very close. The brain is somewhat of a bloodthirsty organ. Even though the brain is only about 2% of the total body weight in humans, it is a highly vascularized organ that receives more than 15% of the body's blood supply and consumes about 20% of the body's total oxygen supply. Therefore, it makes sense to think that there might be a so-called head-to-heart connection in the case of Alzheimer's disease, and there is growing evidence to support this hypothesis. For example, a study in neurology found that seniors with high blood pressure were more likely to have lesions on their brain caused by low blood supply. Clinical stroke, in which the blood flow to the brain is interrupted, has often been associated with an increased risk of subsequent dementia. Several studies have shown that individuals with heart disease, including atrial fibrillation and atherosclerosis, are more likely to have Alzheimer's and are at increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. Additionally, diabetes, which is a disease that affects blood sugar levels, is associated with the development of Alzheimer's and may share a common genetic link. There have been many studies trying to decipher the link between the cardiovascular system and Alzheimer's, and although the exact relation is unclear, the results of these studies appear to support the head-to-heart hypothesis. Now, you may have heard of a new test known as PrecivityAD that received FDA breakthrough designation and is on the path to FDA approval. PrecivityAD is a recently developed blood test that is being used as a diagnostic tool to help determine Alzheimer's. According to Neurology Live, in a study of 686 patients with cognitive impairment or dementia, the PrecivityAD blood test was able to correctly identify brain plaques in 86% of the patients. The PrecivityAD test works by detecting specific types of protein known as beta amyloid that is within the blood. This test has been a major breakthrough for Alzheimer's research because it allows Alzheimer's disease to be diagnosed without expensive and invasive procedures. This will allow for more clinical trials testing the efficiency of new drugs to be run. Another major takeaway from the PrecivityAD test is that it shows that there are disease biomarkers circulating within the blood of someone who has Alzheimer's, which suggests that there is a relationship between the cardiovascular system and Alzheimer's. It is possible that as we further our understanding of the role of the cardiovascular system in Alzheimer's, it could lead us to new treatments and possibly a cure. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are currently no effective treatments for Alzheimer's disease, but these recent findings have led researchers to speculate that the cure may have been inside us all along. HERBICIDE is a procedure in which the circulatory system of two mice is surgically joined to function as a single system. Experiments done on mice reveal that when an older mouse is parabiosed with a younger mouse, the older mouse who has AD-like symptoms, cognitive dysfunction, experiences a complete restoration in levels of synaptic and neuronal proteins, as well as improved memory. The reverse is also true in that when a young mouse is parabiosed with an older mouse, the young mouse develops decreased synaptic plasticity and cognitive functioning. Now, personally, I don't like the idea of parabiosing mice, but I can appreciate the scientific insight they give. These findings suggest that during the aging process, the brain can be modified through circulating blood factors. Now, blood-based treatment. A small 2017 study done at Stanford Hospital tested the hypothesis that young blood can rejuvenate brain tissue and improve cognitive performance in people. Although the study didn't show significant effect on cognition, it did show significant improvement in ability to perform daily living skills. However, as you can imagine, blood transfusion as a treatment is controversial, and it's still unclear how much it actually improves cognition. Pharmaceutical companies are currently researching the effectiveness of blood-derived treatments. One of these companies, called Alkahest, is currently in phase 2 clinical trials for a plasma-derived product known as GRF6021 as a potential treatment for age-related cognitive impairment. In conclusion, it's too early to tell if blood-based treatment is going to be the next step in Alzheimer's research. But I think it is safe to say that the cardiovascular system does play a role in Alzheimer's disease, whatever the role may be. Perhaps there is a disease-related compound in the blood that contributes to it, or perhaps there is a possible therapeutic compound in the blood of healthy individuals. Although this puzzle is still a work in progress, the possibility for discovery and recent developments in this field give me hope that we are close to solving it. One thing I would like to add is a lesson I learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the past year, so much research has been dedicated to understanding and combating the coronavirus. And look how close we are now to finally defeating it. When people join together for a common goal, whether it is creating a vaccine or researching a brain disease, anything can be achieved. I believe that is not a question of if we find a cure for Alzheimer's, but when. And the more people that join together to promote and fund Alzheimer's research, the sooner we will get there. I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Kundu and Anna Teodorescu for advising and overseeing my project, to Dr. Robert Hughes for being my mentor and assisting me in my research, and to NASA and the New Jersey Space Grant Consortium for funding my fellowship project, and also to everyone who came to watch the presentations today. And this is my website.
That was a wonderful presentation, Nora. Learned so much, and thank you so much again, Dr. Hughes, for taking the time to mentor Nora. We will now take maybe a couple of questions for Nora. Does anyone have any question for Nora?
I have a question.
Yes, Marna, please go ahead.
Well, so this doesn't matter. It's just.
What was that?
I'm sorry.
I said, do you guys hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, so I had a question. It's like, so Alzheimer's disease, is it more common in older adult individuals or younger, or doesn't matter?
Oh, definitely older. It mainly
Older.
people. Yeah.
Also, I have a question. So, how you said if getting new blood may help patient. So, is there like a way to produce like artificial blood yet?
I don't think they have a way to do it. I think, because giving people someone else's blood as a treatment, that's kind of, it's a little out there to think, but I think they're looking at, blood derived, looking at compounds that are in blood that they could manufacture and then give to people. It's all still being researched, so there's no like definite answer, but there's potential for it.
Yes, thank you very much.
The drug that you said is in still clinical testing, is that an injection or would that be a transfusion treatment?
I think I've heard people giving it orally, but I think it would be an injection.
Okay, so it's like maybe like a one and done or something that you take every day, but not a big procedure like a transfusion.
I don't think it would be a big transfusion.
Okay.
Was it to that, Dr. Hughes?
That seems like it would be a lot better.
I would say that at the moment it's early days, so it would require intravenous injection probably on a regular basis, but I wouldn't call that a transfusion because it's a concentrated extract. But the the aspiration is that rather than using blood fractions, that we could identify key molecules that are really exerting the effect, and then just create them in vitro, and that would obviate the need for blood.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Okay, that you can ask Ava. That would be, we have to make that the last question though, because we're running pressed for time. Yes, please go ahead, Ava.
So I know that there's a lot of cardiovascular linkage between Alzheimer's and the heart, but do you know any other examples of what could possibly link Alzheimer's to any other part of the body?
There's a lot. They don't really understand the pathology. There's a lot of linkage. I know they're doing research connections to everything. It's still being understood, the pathology of it. But I'm sure there's a ton of stuff you could find out. The heart was just one way of looking at it, the cardiovascular system.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you once again, Nora. Very well done. And thank you again, Dr. Hughes, for helping Nora.
Great. I have to get off. I'm sorry. I have a meeting in 4 minutes. So, all
Okay.
right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Our next presenter is Julio. So Anna is going to take over. Anna, no? Should I introduce?
No, actually, Kevin Hall was his mentor and he's here. And so Kevin will introduce Julio.
Oh, okay. Before Kevin introduce Julio, I just want to thank Kevin for mentoring Julio. Kevin has also mentored our previous NASA fellows. So Kevin, please go ahead. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce Julio. He considers himself a small-time boy. He was born and raised about 7 miles east of the Lincroft campus in Long Branch. He is the current president of the Environmental Club and secretary of the Computer Science Club, and I'm the advisor for the Computer Science Club. And I want to thank Julio for taking on, in addition to everything else he was doing, the leadership role there, because most of the club's leadership at the start of the academic year finished their time at Brookdale in the fall, and Julio helped fill that void so that the club can continue to be active and under very difficult circumstances. He is a member of the PTK Honor Society. He is a first-generation college student and often likes to take the midnight train going anywhere. While working on his fellowship project, he attended EMT training to assist him in the development of his prototype. And Julio, I finally got around to getting my Arduino Uno, and I'm looking forward to wiring it up after the sessions that we had together.
All right, that sounds great. I guess I'll take over from now. All right, so let me share my screen. Can you guys hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. View. All right, so let me check. Okay, got it. So my presentation, it was prototyping with microcontrollers. My name is Julio. My mentor was Kevin Hall. Okay, let's continue. So according to the American Health Association, under 500,000 people suffered a cardiac arrest out of hospital, with 90% of them resulting in death. We will look at the why. Why is this number so high? Even though CPR triples the rate of survival, we see that 70% of Americans say they're not prepared to administer CPR. So when we look at what makes good chest compressions, we look at the rate. It has to be 100 to 120 compressions per minute. We have to look at the depth, which is 2 to 2.5 inches. And then we got to consider the rescue breathing with a BVM. All right, so our project objective is to create something to help people perform CPR. Our target audience would be someone who has no prior experience in giving CPR. And we will mainly focus on chest compression only CPR, because who wants to give mouth to mouth with COVID? Okay, so we chose to do this on an Arduino Uno board instead of applications that you could download on your phone. But we chose a microcontroller board because it has a processor, it has an IDE, development environment, it has memory, it has some GPIO pins, which allow for sensors to be connected. It could be Wi-Fi and Bluetooth compatible. It's portable because it's extremely tiny, and it could be inexpensive, depending on where you buy it. So the phase one of CPR, first you got to check if they're responsive. If they're not responsive, you call for help, and then you check the vital signs. If they have no pulse, you got to start pressing fast, then hard. So how do we tackle the first challenge of checking if they're responsive if I didn't know how to perform CPR? Okay, so we look at the speech synthesis module, which we could prompt the user to check if the person's responsive by tapping them on the shoulder or screaming at them. And if they're not responsive, it could advise them to call 911 or get an AED. And then it prompts the user to like place a secondary device on them. And in this video, we'll showcase the speech synthesis module. So we could make the speech synthesis module say whatever, whatever it needs to say. So we have two ways to check pulse, which I had access to. The ECG, which checks the heart electrical signal, and the PPG. How the PPG works is it shoots a green light through your arm, through your skin. It would hit your, it will reflect off your blood and to a photosensor, which will measure the intensity in which it reflects back, and that will create like the wavelengths, which we'll see later on in this presentation. So with the ECG results, we could calculate the heart rate numerically, but the benefit from an ECG comes with the graph it could display. But the problem here, the drawback becomes, this graph is very beneficial for someone who administers advanced life support. That's like a nurse, paramedic, physician, but to some of us, reading this data may be a bit complicated because we need extra form of education to fully understand it. And then we use the PPG, which also does could get the numerical data, but it also has a bit of drawbacks because it focuses on the radial pulse. If someone was unconscious, you will go for the carotid artery to check for the pulse. So that's his drawback. So what are we looking for? We're looking for no pulse. Below, I have some graphs that show different types of pulses, and then this graph shows what the PPG could graph, and we would expect someone. This is on the ECG. We will expect someone with an ECG to, if they have no if their heart is not beating, to have a flat line. That's not always the case because they could have pulseless electrical activity, which means they may have electrical activity in their heart and it may look like a normal monitor, but they have no pulse. Or let's say someone that provides advanced life support could use an ECG. It could read an ECG, and let's say if it says they could distinguish VFib or VTAC with an ECG. In the cases which they will have to perform CPR. Okay, the phase 2 of this device, we have a tactile verifier, and we have to measure the quality of compressions and find a way to display it. So we use a tactile plus gesture sensor. So the tactile sensor will make sure there's a hand acting upon it, and the gesture sensor will count how much compressions you make for how much compressions you perform. So it's like, as long as my hand is pressing upon the tactile compression, the gesture sensor will activate and count for me. In the case of CPR, you have to do 30 chest compressions before administering two rescue breaths. So how do we measure compression rate? In this video, I'll show you what method I used. So why did I use this type of method? Because according to a research presentation in the American College of Emergency Physicians, medical students and physicians who often listen to the song and perform CPR maintained 100 beats per minute, and would often remember and maintain it further down their experience, further down the road. And finally, the inclusion of an AI vision sensor. Why? We want to make sure the person has their hand in the correct position to perform CPR, because we don't want to see this, and I'll show you the video. That's how you should not perform CPR, and under no circumstances should you do that. So the AI will make sure your hand is in the correct position, and nothing like that occurs. Okay, the things to do. I want to include a 2-minute a timer. It's like with 2-minute intervals, so it could tell the person if there's a second person to switch out, because performing chest compressions could tire you out. An LCD as a conventional way to see data, and a second Arduino to establish an Arduino to Arduino connection. One receives the value and one displays the value, and we will do this through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. We gotta work on a way to find the depth.
In terms of data index,
And
right?
we gotta
Human time.
we gotta find revised way to find the rate again, and perhaps 3D print a shell for this, so it looks a bit nicer. But as we can see, this is what we will use for a timer. This is our LCD screen. These are our 2 Arduinos, and this is the sensor I may use to calculate the depth. My resources page, and finally, I love all your faces. Thank you for watching my presentation. That's it.
Great job, Julio.
Thank
Wow,
you.
the presentation came a really long way. I thought you had a great presentation 2 weeks ago, and now it looks amazing. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Our next presenter.
Do we want to take questions?
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's less a question, but like, first of all, great presentation and great invention. So last question, like, do you want to go like further with this? Because it's so it's really cool.
Yeah, I want to go further, but the thing is, I will need to go through a lot of more schooling, like and if I ever want to go a lot further, I will have to learn like machine learning algorithms and actually understand how these sensors work, instead of like using instead of like buying a sensor and hoping it works, that type of case.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's gonna be this could be a long process, and I see something. It may be completed in like 2 to 3 years, but I will have to definitely work on it consistently.
Thank you.
So, I mean, you took the project from concept to wrapping it in a case. That's how far you are from, a final product. Amazing. Does anybody else have any questions?
No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment. I think that's brilliant. I think the whole thing is such a cool idea, because so many people don't know how to do CPR, and that'll just walk them right through it. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. That was incredible.
Thank you for being an awesome. Thank you for being an awesome audience. You guys are amazing.
I just want to say that I did have an opportunity once to be with people when we needed to perform a function like this, and many of us didn't know how. So keep with it, and eventually I think it should be something that every family has. It should be sold. So keep your ideas going.
Thank you. I will keep working on it. Yeah, I have a mentor that could help me program more functions, and we'll see this come to life maybe one day, hopefully.
Anjali, do you want me to introduce the next presenter?
Please go ahead, Anna, our last presenter.
Yes. So our last presenter, but not by far the least, is Dorothy Spear. Dorothy will be graduating in the spring of 21 with an associate's in mathematics, my favorite subject. From there, She plans to transfer to a four-year institution to study physics, mathematics, and engineering. Dorothy is the vice president of both the math and physics club. And as a co-advisor of the math club, I can tell you, she's a true leader. She put together presentations for the math club that in the past only instructors have put together and has come out amazing. They came out really good. While in these clubs, she has presented multiple topics, so not just for the math club. She has built a cloud chamber to visualize the traces of subatomic particles with the physics club, has an integral part in the ongoing construction of a go-kart, a collaboration between physics and engineering clubs. She has also been a member of the PTK Honor Society, the engineering club, the dance club. Outside of school, Dorothy prefers to spend her time helping others. She is a volunteer EMT, so she performs CPR on a regular basis. Volunteers at a food pantry, and volunteers, get this, as an assistant coach for the New Jersey junior pistol team. Dorothy spent several years on both the rifle and pistol junior teams. The teams focus on safe firearm handling, responsibility, and proper techniques for precision shooting. For Dorothy and many others, it is a meditative sport. It requires focus, mindfulness, and the ability to control your emotions. Dorothy hopes that this project will enable her to be a better coach and will give others the ability to better analyze their shooting techniques. Dorothy, take it away.
Thank you, Anna. Okie dokies. Yeah, so just in case, because I understand if anyone has an issue with shooting or it's a problem for them, fair warning, just in case, I understand. Okay. Okay, is this working?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. This is very weird. Which one can you see?
So we can see the slideshow, and you have to click on the first thing that says from the beginning. Oh,
yeah, I know. It's because I have multiple monitors. Pardon me. They don't like being kind when things need to happen. It's very rude. Okay. Okay, is it working?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Awesome. All right. Okay, so this is motion tracking in precision pistol shooting. The purpose, I know we're running out of time, whatever. So the purpose is to closely analyze the movements of pistol shooters. Obviously, when you shoot a gun, what is happening with you is incredibly important because the bullet is coming from you. So any movement you make impacts the bullet. Specifically today, we're going to be looking at the breaking of the wrist. And there's some really good visuals that will go into detail about what that looks like later on. Now we're going to use this because it's incredibly common and it is an easier one to look at. One of my main goals for this was to design a simple, accessible, and affordable method. So I didn't want anything fancy. I didn't want anything that people would have to really go searching for. I used free software that I found online, and I used my cell phone, and I used a computer, the one that I'm presenting on right now. So it's nothing crazy or amazing, and that's exactly what I wanted. And really the main purpose for this is for me to become a better coach, to help the kids. As you can see, they're not kids. I call them kids. In this photo, that's us at the national matches. And that's what everything's about. And when it comes to shooting, everything's very fast and I can't see things that fast. So that is where the AI motion tracking comes in, is it can see things that I cannot. So some background theory, first we'll start with machine learning algorithms. So artificial intelligence learns from training data. It's kind of like sitting a kid down and starting them with the ABCs and teaching them how to talk and speak intelligently, hopefully. So you feed it data and it will learn from that, and it will learn to make predictions and decisions without you telling it explicitly what to do. It's often used in medicine, email filtering, and motion tracking. The best thing about it is the more info you give it, the smarter it becomes and the better its predictions are. Today, I am using Deep Lab Cut. My entire project was for Deep Lab Cut. And it is an open source program toolbox, free. It's designed for extracting animal poses without markers. Markers being those little like dots you sometimes see in how they make movies. And so the dots, the camera will focus on those. And that's great, but it's not great for mice and cheetahs running around because they don't cooperate. So this program is great because you can place virtual markers and then the AI will learn about where to put them. So now let's get into how to hold a pistol. So it's a quick lesson. So the ideal situation, as you can see in this lovely photo, is to have your elbow and wrist locked, meaning straight out, you want a straight arm, or like a block of wood, as my coaches love to say. When I say breaking from now on, I don't mean snapping bones, I mean any bend in your arm. So if you bend your wrist, if you bend your elbow, hopefully you don't bend your humerus, that would be weird. That's what we're looking at, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're trying to avoid. It's problematic because again, if you move while you're shooting, it will affect where your shot goes. That's not good. We are aiming for the X in the middle, and the further out, the sadder we get. And the current beliefs, incredibly common, everyone believes these, why wouldn't you? Is if your wrist breaks up, the shot goes up. If your wrist breaks down, the shot goes down. Here we see, we've got the breaking up. This is very, very obvious, but when things are going fast, people react, and this will happen. They'll break up, they'll break down, or they will be just right. And this is where the corresponding shots would go. So the procedure for this, of my down and dirty motion tracking, first we gather the data. So that means my phone and my notebook. I record the person shooting and I write down where the shots went. Then we train the network. That means you upload the videos. I mark them manually, and you'll see in future slides exactly what I mean by that. And then with all of that data, I tell the software, I say, hey, take this and learn. And it goes, okay. Then after the network knows what's happening, I give it more videos and I say, please do the work for me because I don't want to do it anymore. And it says, okay, cool. And then after that, we can draw conclusions, see what the videos look like, compare them to my lovely paper notes about where the shots hit, and see what happens when it comes to wrist versus shot placement. So as I said, down and dirty. This is the shot range where I shot pistol and recorded test subjects. This is my very quickly sketched circle. I'm a math major, it is beautiful. And all the shots, the numbers correspond to which shot. So shot number 1, shot number 2. And my phone rested right here. Not even a tripod. Very budget friendly. And special case, but this is good because I already know what I'm doing, is I was able to instruct one of my test subjects, and it was a fantastic day and it was a great time. And she did wonderfully, which is incredibly impressive. So after that, we upload the videos. This is a small snippet of the video I would upload. So I had many, many, many of those. And once you put those videos in the program, you then have to track them and mark them. And so this has to be completed manually for every single body part, and it is spelled incorrectly, and I love that. And for every single frame that the program identifies for every single video. And so you can see these are my body parts: the muzzle, trigger, middle finger, thumbnail, etc. And I go along and I click every single spot to place a dot so that the software will know where those things should be in relation to others, what they look like, etc. This is me putting the information in to teach the AI. And then once I give all that information, I tell the AI, I say, awesome, make your neural network. And it comes up with something that looks like this. Now I have to manually check this to make sure that we're on the same page. Otherwise, 'tis all for naught. So this is what the AI spits out. And you can see, if we go back and forth, that my markers, which are here and here, match up to where it starts marking things. And so it's got my trigger finger. It's green, it's very slight, but it's green there for the end of it. There's my thumb going all the way down my wrist into my forearm, which is perfect because that means we're in agreement. And that's exactly what we want. That means my neural network is trained and we can get to work. Next, we utilize the network. Unfortunately, due to technical capabilities, I'm unable to simultaneously Zoom and PowerPoint and show you the video output of the program. So imagine it. It's lovely, but essentially what would happen is I would feed a small video like this into the network. And then the network would put the dots on itself. It would put all of the markers, it would place them, it would track them, and it would spit out a very beautiful video that would be very easy to read and view. Again, I'm sorry, I can't include that here. So once all of that is done, we come back to the main goal of this, which is to take what we see and what we've got on the target and try and learn from it. Try and learn from the motion of the shooter and compare it to where their shots land, because that's what it's all about. So this is a little sample of a comparison. This is a video of subject AT, wink, wink. And that's slowed down specifically so you could watch that and pay attention again. So that was slowed down. It's incredibly difficult to see. It takes a lot of training. And so that's specifically shot number 4. And this is where it corresponded to on the target. And so logically, I'm thinking, you might be thinking, maybe she broke her wrist down. I don't know. But so this is what we do. We look at the video, we look at the shot, we visually compare them. Now, one more time before I reveal the answer. No, she did not break her wrist at all. All of that movement is completely normal. There is normal movement and then there's breaking your wrist. And again, it takes training to know exactly what you're looking at. So this test subject did great. She didn't break her wrist. And these shots were most likely due to being tired and the movement of her trigger finger. So the results in the discussion, yay. So concerning wrist movement, there was actually no observed correspondence to shot placement. Now, there's many, many reasons for that, and that is because shooting is not as simple as does your wrist break or not. And not only that, it was a small sample size. These generalities about your wrist breaking are based on years and years of millions of shots being fired. I did not do millions of shots being fired. It's incredibly complex. It depends on every single part of you, from your breathing down to your toes, including what pants you're wearing and what you had for breakfast. It varies day to day and shot to shot. Also, my subjects were very well trained, so that's probably why they did very well. A more realistic target is something right over here. We'd all love to be in the middle with green, but everything is affecting everything. And sometimes we end up all over, and we can do our best to try and figure out what happened. And that's where this AI is good, is because we get a good visualization of what exactly physically happened. So in conclusion, I would say this is an overall success, because my design, down and dirty, cheap and accessible, worked. And it worked with a phone and a wall and a piece of paper and a pencil. And that's all I needed, and a computer. And that's all I wanted to happen. Not only that, but I've created a solid neural network. And again, this network is a basis, and it will just learn and learn and learn. And so it will improve with time, and I can continue to analyze videos based upon what I've done here. Not only that, but the colorful markers are great for showing people what's happening, getting interest of junior shooters, which they're junior shooters, they could be eating bugs. It's happened, I'm not kidding. And it's ideal for visual learners like myself. The colors really help me actually see what's going on. My future goals include experimenting with other deep lab cut tools. It is an incredibly diverse and powerful toolbox of programs, which includes real-time motion tracking, which I would love to implement at matches and possibly drive the juniors crazy, and 3D motion tracking, which includes more than one camera. Obviously, that is not budget friendly. I'd love to integrate it with muzzle tracking technology. The muzzle is the end of the gun where the bullet comes out. And so it would be tracking the movement of the gun and the movement of you at the same time. So what is your wrist doing versus where exactly is your gun pointing? Not only that, but because writing on paper very quickly is a little bit difficult, I would love to do a double camera system for surveilling the shooter and the target simultaneously, so that I'm not rushing around and scrambling. And again, overall, the main goal of this is to help coach younger shooters. It is a great sport, it is meditative, and never stop learning, never stop teaching. I mean, in all aspects of life. I would love to thank the Space Grant Consortium. This has been an idea of mine for a long time, and I've never actually gone through it. This was a perfect opportunity, and I love doing it. I'd love to thank Anna Tudorescu, my academic advisor, and the fantastic, lovely test subject that didn't break her wrist. Lisa Haley, my project advisor. Richard Bogath, who is the head coach of the New Jersey Junior Pistol team, and my personal coach. He's coached me for years. They're all like a family. The entire junior team, it's a family and an inspiration. These are my references, and I am all done.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you so much. And do we have any questions? Are there any questions?
I have a question, yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know why exactly, how is it that, I mean, a sport such as this one, which requires so much precision and accuracy, how on earth could you not have a software like this? How, like, why is it, like, it's, you know, it's, lots of sports have it. You know, I'm Pakistani, I watch cricket, and even we have something like precision and whatnot to track the ball and whatnot. So why wouldn't you have this with firearms, especially with a sport which requires so much accuracy and stuff? So just
I completely agree with the question, and that is why I did this project, and that is why I've been wanting to do this, is because we don't have technology like this available and open. I think it's probably a matter of popularity. There is precision shooting in the Olympics, but it's nothing like football, it's nothing like baseball, it's nothing like cricket. And so it's a matter of popularity, and you know, usually the shooting sports people are usually older generation. I'm not saying they're not open to technology, but I think they're just used to doing it without it. And I guess, up to the new shooters and the younger generation to bring in this wave of new technology, new ways of looking at it, and hopefully improving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
All right, so a lot of us have to go to class at 1:30. Gitanjali, did you want to say anything else?
Well, I want to thank you all on behalf of, the NASA co-coordinator team, both me and Anna. We want to thank you all for putting so much of effort into your projects. We are so proud of you. And thank you all to the audience who made the time to come here to listen to them, encourage them, and ask so many interesting questions. As you see, they have such good result findings. However, in constraint of time, we had to limit it to 10-minute presentation, but you're more than welcome to contact them if you have more questions. So I know many of you have to attend the class at 1:30. Thank you all for coming, and stay safe, everyone.
Yes, and thank you for attending all of the presentations. At one time, we had over 80 attendees in both rooms, so thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you in person next year.